Welcome to this latest installment of the Visiting Writers Series, which is sponsored by the West Lecture Series. The Humanities Division and the English program welcome you all to this event. So today, we'll be spending some time with a writer and teacher I respect and admire greatly, someone who I am genuinely happy to share with our little literary community here at Brevard College, Jason Baltazar. Jason is, to read his bio, a proud Salvadoran American, originally from the Appalachian corner of Maryland. He is a high school dropout, first-generation PhD, and professor of creative writing at James Madison University. He wants his writing to leak across borders, conduct strange rituals, and speak with a weird heart on the tip of its tongue. His work has received several nominations for the Pushcart Prize, as well as Best Small Fictions and Best of the Net in multiple genres. And you can find his writing in places such as Boston Review, New Delta Review, and Wrongdoing Magazine. To give more of a personal intro for Jason, in my science fiction and fantasy class this semester, we have this recurring featured assignment called The Geek Out. It is a 10-minute introduction to a story or an author that the student loves or admires and wants to share with everyone, highlighting all the best parts for anyone interested in taking a look. My geek out for Jason, if unencumbered, would be an hour long. We would have no time for the reading. I cannot do that because I need to share with everybody. But I can give you the short introduction to what makes Jason a terrific writer. First off, Jason has what I would call a wild imagination. Wild imaginations, when they manifest in writers, can travel freely through different territories of the fantastic, whether that be science fiction, fantasy, horror, weird fiction, any mixture of those things. In one territory, Jason has his story Misconceptions of the Monstrous Tongue Dispelled, published online in Timber, and that presents itself as an essay written by an academic about what could be described as a contagious language, which alters the verbal and cognitive patterns of its users. And of course, those patterns do end up showing up in the story too. In another territory, Jason has When the 10,000-Ton Trilobite Attacked, which is pretty much exactly as the title promises and then some. Now, anyone who can pivot from strange contagious tongues to literal kaiju has got some range. That's what I'm saying. His stories also subvert expectations. Even while you read them, you think they're going one place and they will turn on you and snap back at you. For example, his story Down Creekside, available online in Bracken, is a straight-up chiller. It's a terrifying story written from the perspective of someone who readers will assume is a killer, luring someone into the woods as prey. Now, they're not wrong, but they're also not right. Let's just say beware the forest when you're wandering through it. Meanwhile, in my personal favorite title of all your stories, which you are reading from today, Some Transcendent American-Made Backyard Doom Machines. So, do you know that guy in your neighborhood who's obsessed with his lawn? The one who might get down and trim it with scissors? Or the guy who has to have like the new outdoor toy and sing its praises? So, in Doom Machines, imagine those guys have formed a cult with a gospel that seems to be completely built around reviews for imaginary recreational devices with moderately threatening names, such as, and I'm using one example, the Mr. Appleseed Cluster Bomb Patio Umbrella. Cluster Bomb Patio Umbrella. As you might guess, the story equally embraces both the horrific and the comedic in a very absurd way. There's honestly a lot more I could say about Jason, such as how his writing, it tags you when you read it. It's like thorns on a plant when you reach for it and grab it. It sinks into you in ways you don't expect. The language is often sharp, vibrant, vivid, and can draw blood. And frankly, it reminds you that you're alive when you read it. Now, as much as there is a lot more to say, I think it's best to experience his worlds as they are, in the moment, by surprise. And no matter how strange they are, how weird they are, whatever you see or hear, Deep down, his worlds are always more familiar to you than you realize. So please, before we get started, I do want to explain something. This reading will be doing something a little different than we normally do. Jason will read 2 of his stories, and then after that, he and I are going to team up for a collaborative reading, that round robin style, where we select scenes from each other's for our own work on set themes: transformation, wonder, and hauntings. Both of us write speculative fiction, and both of us tend to trend towards, let's say, the unique, and sometimes brutal. So, you've been warned. Of course, there will be a Q&A after the 3-round reading, and we just hope it's a really good, fun experience for you all. Now please, welcome our special guest, Jason Baltazar.
Thank you all. I want to thank Dr. Mills and Dr. Binsell for inviting me. Thank you to the school for having me here. I've met a lot of you already in various classes, and those conversations were pretty rad, so thank you for that and for spending this time with me today. It's going to go from 0 to weird in like 3 seconds, so I'm just going to jump into some transcendent American-made backyard doom machines. Number 1, Silken Scorpion Pulsating Sprinkler, registered trademark. Lo, the Scorpion crouches a diesel tabernacle, a tremble upon quick lock support poles that do pulse alive, and they are 4 in number, included at time of purchase for no additional cost. And we do rejoice, for the Scorpion consecrates the ever 3-inch blades of our manicured Kentucky blue with droplets of condensation slicking from high-polished titanium carapace. We do rejoice, for it anoints the creaseless foreheads of our young as they zip through its shadow upon the blue tongue of the slip and slide. We do rejoice, for the ventilation ridges emit the sweet sucker of machine readiness in complement to our own offered incense of Kingsford brand long-burning charcoal briquette, the gold standard of grilling. May the vegetable and red meat portions of our devotional kebabs char in equal measure. We do rejoice, for the transport tubing does flow with patented piss yellow neurotoxin, and the sutured-in sheep's bladder reservoirs do await taut with aerosolizing reagent for the coming of a rapturous dispersal. We do rejoice, assured that upon the day when our enemies advance upon the cul-de-sac with proposals for adjusted income housing, we shall slide our forearms into the Scorpion's lateral control cavities and curl our fingers around the lever tabs, and we shall rejoice when the pneumatic whale-tooth confirmation component clamps down upon us. Yes, we shall cry. Snap these firm and faithful wrists. We gladly offer up Radius and Ulna, if only you'll defend good and steadfast property value. We shall lift our dangling palms rejoicing, if only you'll deliquest low-income heathen lung with the nerve song of your segmented tail, too. Mr. Appleseed Cluster Bomb Patio Umbrella, registered trademark. Bless the ergonomic divots of the non-recyclable plastic keys upon your control panel, easily operable even with our wrists bound in plaster casts, for they summon such cleansing rains. And the fiber optic cables joining the panel to the Gibbon brain tank, bless them, for they deliver our prayer and our need. Bless the folds of all 6 of the Gibbon brains, wired in serial, for here the edicts of divine will are processed a go. And the aluminum alloy pole, bless it, for it produces thrust, and we humbly kneel scab-kneed at the altar of thrust. Bless the elongated vat-grown phalanges joined to the genuine luxe wing leather to form the canopy clasped patiently closed as the umbrella approaches optimal altitude, for they cradle the seeds of glorious destruction. And the complete set of 4 swivel-top weatherproof chairs around the frosted glass launching pad, upon which Hunter has again neglected to place a coaster beneath his West Coast IPA, bless them, for from these we bear witness to fiery deluge. Bless the 300 ribbed steel bomblets flung free by the expansion of the canopy, for they rain down upon the neighboring subdivision, and the slightly more generous square footage of the plots of the neighboring subdivision, bless it. For we have tilled and sown into it the wrath of our one and true umbrella, which drifts now unfurled above its works, judging them to be good. 3. Mark II Taskmaster Adirondack Gender Revelation Turret, registered trademark. Mark II Taskmaster, with aftermarket stabilizing pseudopodia, we praise thee. May the membranous dilation of your alternating intake valves recycle the pneuma of our adorations into combustive yield, a yearning fuel for most righteous discharge. Holy, the mathematically pure and certain line of your lifted barrel announcing the trajectory of deliverance over terracotta roofing tiles replaced only 2 summers ago, which have, we feel, given the house a welcoming old world charm. Holy, the satellite-assisted targeting drones with their infrared-enabled eye stalks, capable of guiding your precision strikes even through the drifts of black smoke wafting from the neighboring subdivision. Holy, the wide acacia slats of the gently reclined gunner seat that conducts the reverberation of your gospels through the tender devout meats of our buttocks, and the adjustable straps of your little tyrant registered trademark booster seat, that the children may see and know. Verily, the mere thought of your wide-stance domestic steel and thoroughbred horseflesh frame soothes the ache in our hearts, an ache for the absence of a touch that will lift the burden of grief from our shoulders, a grief born in the recognition of our limitations as tragically small and fragile flotsam caught in the eddies of a marvelous but ultimately indifferent nature. How our words echo in the dark of your speaking chamber. How we long to touch that cradle of fire. May we touch Mark II Taskmaster? May we confirm with the utterly fallible instrument of our flesh the heat of one so turgid and resolute? Yes. There is the warmth of a knowing throat, scalding the whorls from our fingertips, and what does it matter? For what identity have we but willing fingers bent implication of your dancing trigger? May we be born again, the Mark II Taskmaster? May we slide down the rifling of your embrace? Oh, thank you, most good and gracious gun. We await ordnance. Speak and deliver us from the clutch of these wounding days, these neighborly brunches and giggle-soaked family board game evenings, which seek to strip away the ballistic plates of our body armor, to mollify our hyper-vigilant flesh, to dig and tear and plant within our hearts, hearts that only sing of you, Taskmaster Turret, that blasphemous bloom of communion. Curse them. Break them upon the bend of your injection spring, for tempting us to feel at peace in the company of and care of others, tempting us to speak of we, tempting us to extend beyond ourselves, vulnerable and curious, into the millionfold currents of being that surround us. Deliver us, we beg. May we remain locked and loaded. May we secure 55mm lives. May we gaze up from your firing pin and see only that closed circle of blue sky at show in the gape of your ever-ready mouth until you speak, calling us to everlasting ignition. Okay, that's the first one. Okay, this one is called Fashion Week Central Occupied Territory, which has kind of a unique relationship to Dr. Mills, which we can perhaps talk about later. So the thing about the death squads is their outfits are super cute. There's a clear sartorial vision at work, and that reassures me as a dutiful subject of civil authority that they know what they're doing. I believe clothes really do make the manslaughter. Some person, or team of persons, as currently defined by the statutes of personhood, was given the task of dressing the death squads, and this person, or team of persons, as currently defined by the statutes of personhood, of course, they really leaned into that shit. Bravo. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to look out the window of my mandated housing unit and see a death squad lined up in obedient shoulder-to-shoulder fatality formation, but you know, they're out there doing the work, and at the moment, I have eyes. You notice things. Plus, if you're going to be summarily executed for holding seditious views, or inhabiting a seditious body, or feeling a deep and freeing yet seditious love for another person, asterisk, see previous qualification, don't you want that to happen with a hint of style? The reinforced multi-environment mask designed for the death squads have that vaguely sexy insectoid thing going on, just gorgeous flowing lines, reminiscent of those sleek predatory insects with cannibalistic feeding practices in which they hunt and consume even former broodmates with whom they emerge from the egg sac to share their very earliest nourishment, that kind. Taking in and breaking down bodily proteins that formerly governed movement, sensory process, flight, goddamn, eating even the untethered rise and rush of flight, absorbing it all for their own sustenance, or something like that. Aesthetic response is highly subjective. We are totally spoiled. Our boys are nothing like the backroad Central American death squads my father talked about decades ago. Those fools didn't even have masks. Like, when he finally came face to face with the squad, he was literally face to face. He could see that it was Mauricio from down the street or Ernesto from university. That's probably why they gave him an ultimatum instead of just dropping him right then and there, because they had to look at and recognize each other in that moment. Not our squads. They never would have let him reach asylum. They're insulated and secure, efficient. And get this, my father's death squads, they just wore the standard issue camo fatigues. Can you imagine? What a tacky silhouette. All of that soft material drooping off their bodies, all of that exposed skin, their sweating arms, hands, and faces in the tropical heat. Our death squads are covered head to toe in the finest tactical couture. Base layer of insulating neoprene, then a ripstop Kevlar weave, and over that the articulated tungsten body armor with elastic webbing for maximum maneuverability. The juxtaposition of textures really gives the uniform's character while suggesting an effortless, organic feel. All of this is presented in a deep, hungering, open-mouthed, infinitely ingesting event horizon black, so that in the night the death squads swim with the shadow, and in the day they are apparitions of the night. Whoever the designers were, they stripped away all other colors, even in the low-relief flag embossed over the heart, letting the sophistication of a limited palette speak for itself. They understood that the most long-lived and elegant designs are streamlined, and streamlining is a process of elimination. Elimination is efficiency. Efficiency is progress. We're in the business of progress. Part of the styling genius of this look is that nothing can touch the death squads, not even the sun. I mean, imagine that feeling. Every tactile inch of your skin hidden, intimately enveloped in the embrace of exoskeletal armor. There is no more you. There is no more vulnerable participant in human relationships. There is only protection, immunity from harm, exception from humble limitations, just glistening hard shell, and nothing remotely Freudian about it. 100% smooth, hard carapace. See, this whole shell vibe combined with the buggy face masks makes me think the designers had this total biomimetic thing going on. Like, they got the order, hey, you got to come up with gear for the death squads, and they happened to see a beetle or a wasp, and a light bulb went off. Don't worry, one of the rationed low wattage ones, I'm sure. I mean, I'm not an entomology nerd or anything, especially because the scientific impulse is clearly branded heretical intellectual witchcraft in the Citizens Code of Conduct section of the little red, white, and blue book, which of course I carry on my person, asterisk, at all times. But look, I see a theme here, and I think the effort and unity of design should be admired. Even from a branding perspective, the Death Squad's game is on point. My father's Death Squads took the names from 20th century Salvadoran presidents, none of whom really managed to bolster the blood flow of fully erect, transmissible democracy. Our death squads, though, they're named after the founding fathers, praise them, whose virility and fecundity are unassailable forever and always, amen. It's such a simple marketing move that it seems almost too easy, but that is the master stroke. The names of the old gods are a direct line to the fearful heart of the true believer. Efficiency is progress. All of this is really just the canvas onto which touches of true artistry are laid, because it's always in the details that the flourish of a master's hand shows through, and a truly appreciative citizen should notice these things. Notice how the placement and shape of each segment of body armor mirrors an ideal underlying musculature, so that no matter the shape of the person, asterisk, beneath the armor, from the outside they fully express raw physical power. Form often suggests the ideal, and obedience is one ideal. Notice how the infrared lenses of the face masks are actually red, so that for the death squad, the world is already awash in the color of submission. No instinctive or subconscious shock when life's blood meets the air. Or the reflective coating on those lenses, so that if you have the courage to seek their eyes, you'll only see yourself seeking. Who even thinks of that? The heavy-duty polycarbonate shields pitched perfectly to match the thud of boot heels when struck with the baton, doubling the sound of approach. Just listen to them now, drumming up Ghost Squad, stomping lockstep right to the door. Ooh, the graceful kinetic beauty of the forward-weighted battering ram dispelling illusions of here I am safe. The surge of dark on the doorstep behind the splinters, cold black water spilling command, so sleek in the brush there's almost too much to take in, but notice, please. Contoured carbon fiber knuckle plating knocking home, answer the fucking question. Trademarked and textured palm of gloves guaranteeing secure grip on wrists and hair. Drink it in, do not let these details go to waste. These weapons are instruments precisely designed to perform their function with artful efficiency. Hard, seamless alloy steel tubing, negotiating compliance and concession with tibia and patella and vertebra after vertebra, swinging arcs of you stand accused, have been found guilty, sentenced to be carried out on site. Such exquisite attention to material, density of the truncheon accentuating the transfer of power, channeling impact deep into insubordinate muscle and bone, slip-resistant, non-marking, dual-density rubber tread with shock-eliminating heel cushion and extra wide steel toe cap for protection and durability when deployed against the pleas of treasonous jaws, and do not worry. The designers included a breathable, blood-borne, pathogen-resistant membrane so there can be no contamination. Hammer-forged chrome-lined barrel with ventilated rib, thermoplastic handguard, and extended flash suppressor pressed into persuasion points, guiding every single step toward the street-side pit. Isn't it magnificent? Everything a component of a clear, cohesive plan. Ergonomic two-finger grip with a bolt action system to charge the rifle, crafted with steel, aluminum, strength, and honor. Even the click of the chambered round is crisp and clean, no bullshit. Mechanical efficiency, ready to eeny, meeny, miny, mow down the opposition, and it's all really breathtaking, towing the edge of the impatient grave. And all I can think is, what an artistic triumph. Look good, feel good. God damn, it makes me... That's it.
Did you actually have to deal with the death squad?
I'm sorry?
Did you actually have to deal with the American death squad yourself?
No, not yet.
No, actually, I can ask a question about that. That's in reference to the death squads in El Salvador, right?
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that your father was like, that was based in part by real experience your dad had, right?
Mhm.
I really like that comparison you made to praying mantises, the creature that eats its own, like, beloved
Oh, yeah.
partner.
Well, I mean, you love bugs.
I do love bugs.
And praying mantises are freaky little bugs.
They are.
I love them.
They are the best bugs.
So, just to repeat, Little Tyrant Booster Seat. Yeah, I laughed my ass off when I read that. Thanks, man. Also, to sort of pick up the thread that Jason left for you all, that story was published in Boston Review in a speculative fiction-oriented issue. And I remember showing it to you, you're like, hey, I think you've got the goods for this. Like, check this out. They have different editors looking at it and selecting it. It's rare that you see, at the time it was rare that you saw mainstream journals do like full commitment to like sci-fi issues or fantasy issues. And damn it if you didn't get picked for it. Like, I'm so proud of you. Also, that thing hits every time. Yeah, like the right mix of humor and oh shit. So, on that note, now is when I announce that I'm actually joining the reading. So, I actually also want to explain, Jason and I are colleagues, friends from University of Kansas and our time there at the PhD. And in all the years that we were there, in the 5 years that I was a student, we never got to read together. Until now. We are rectifying that mistake. So, we actually were inspired by a previous installment of this reading with Professor Bensel and Mary Beth Holman, where you did round-robin style, reacting to each other's poems, and Jason and I were like, what if we pick scenes from our work that highlight different themes that we see as important to our work, just so you all could see how we tackle it. And yeah, that's what we're doing. So, we should do the highly scientific method of deciding who should go first. All right, I go first. So, I never win rock, paper, scissors, this is nice. No, this one is about transformation. So I'll be reading a scene based on the concept of transformation, and then Jason will, and we'll shift to the next scene, and so on until we decide the winner, which is all of you. You're all the winners. Seriously. So this scene for transformation is from my novel in progress that is very, very strongly inspired by the whole issue of like fractured family dynamics, inheriting your parents' bullshit, literally. You'll see the example here. Also, this is kind of a scene with someone reading from a book, so you'll notice the shift in the language. On cue, Jonah's mother started shouting, presumably at his father. It was hard to make out through the walls of the barn, and he wasn't about to try and eavesdrop. But this was a side of her he had never seen. The thought of them arguing over his grandfather's body filled him with sorrow, as did the sight once again of his empty grave awaiting him after whatever ritual was taking place in the barn. And dagger. My dad had an actual dagger in his hands. Jonah opened the family chronicle, big book, to a point halfway through, which he'd only noted in passing when he read the book the first time, as the most recent entry in it. Fishing in his pocket with his other hand, Jonah pulled out the small flashlight his father had gifted him the year before. Balancing it in his arm and holding his flashlight by his ear, he read the last block of text in the Theriot family chronicle. So this is the origins of the family. When the great famine took Europe in 1315, the village of Barpham was ravaged by starvation and death. The original of the Theriot family, William, felt himself grow hollow from hunger and the great dimming of things. He was told then by God that he must make a request of his family in order for them to live. Feed your family. William then begged his family to fillet his flesh and preserve it as jerky. But they refused because he was their father. They resisted until they starved, and they starved until they all died except for William and his eldest son, John. At the ledge of death itself, William told his son that God commanded him to eat his father's flesh. John refused. William said God would allow his own soul to transcend the pain of waking hell if only John would eat his flesh. Still, John refused. God then said through William that if John agreed and fed, John would receive divine protections and preserve his father's soul inside him, where it could be kept safe until Judgment Day. With great reluctance, John cut a fillet from his father's flesh while he was still alive, albeit dying, driven by a sudden and great hunger, and swallowed it in one bite. William beheld John from his position on their dinner table and smiled. William the father's eyes fell, and John's eyes opened. He saw such things that should not be seen by ordinary men, every moment of his father's life through his father's own eyes, with all of his feelings, ran through him at such a velocity that it would take the strongest human effort just to stop that torrent of memory and look closely for more than 2 seconds. The last thing John saw was his own face, looked upon from below, the splintered wood and rotting hay of the roof above both their heads. Once John recuperated, he discovered that he bore no insanity from what he felt and saw, and he was still himself. His father lay dead before him, his hand covering the strip of skin and flesh taken from his thigh. John never experienced such a reverie again his whole life. He experienced pain from further starvation, but the starvation did not deprive him of his life. John also found he did not grow sick, not even when the Black Plague took so many decades later. Toward the end of the Great Famine, John left Barpham and moved across the Channel to France, where he took residence in, I know I'm going to mispronounce this, Rouen? Is it good? Okay, good. To disguise his family's covenant from the world, he changed his given name to Jean and his family name to Theriot. He lived to the age of 91, and upon the day of his death, the covenant's care was gifted to his son Gilles, who took it for himself in the same way his father had before him. The glory of God is real, Jonah. Legends are real. Our family is legend, cast in the most divine matter of God's creation. You are cast from that same matter, my beloved son, and I hope one day to see you realize this for yourself. Ria Theriot, April 4th, 2006. They're cannibals.
What?
That's just how we end sentences around here.
Yeah, they're cannibals.
Okay, so my transformation selection is the opening scene of a story that's out in the submission wilds right now. There was once a wee scrawny birdling quite confused in his manners at table. Quite confused indeed, go on. And being quite confused, this skin and bone birdling, who had hopped down the stairs from his neat little nest, holding the banister in one hand and his mumble-grumbling belly in the other, sought the counsels of wise Captain Carnivore. He always forgets Lady Lipstick. He does seem to, doesn't he? Come now, sweet birdling, leave none overlooked. And also elegant Lady Lipstick, ever attending the captain's side. What, he had inquired of them, can be done to calm this cramping belly? At which Captain Carnivore proclaimed, "Welcome to my splendid idea," producing forth his one, his only, his phantasmagorical hydrochloric fork, gleaming green and all a-bubble through the glass of its barrel. "And welcome to my splendid idea still, dear birthling, even after such time has passed. Take care to hold it properly, your manners reflect upon your instruction. Well put, fair lady, my fledgling, you recall the appropriate grip." The birdling squeezed his fist around the handle of the fork in backhand control, needles down, with his thumb resting over the plunger. The proper posture. The birdling made an L of his arm and raised the fork high overhead. "Quite so. Proceed." But the birdling looked down at his supper and did not care for the way that it squirmed, wrinkling up the dining linen. In fact, he was still very upset over how the supper had kicked over his glass of 100% all-natural juice, cranberry juice, with its flat-soled canvas shoe, redding all over everything. He found red a disquieting color, a very loud color, in fact. "May I ask again," he inquired of his instructors, seeking reassurance that he had been appropriately guided, "what the captain is in captaincy of?" Again, I reassure you it does not matter one iota of what I am captained in, when, how often, or by whom, for do you not concede that I am the very picture of command, whence these epaulets, if not years of service?" The birdling observed that the epaulets were exquisite and authoritative. "And if not a captain, would I ever bother to wind and intertwine?" The birdling observed that Lady Lipstick did drape adoringly about the captain's form. "So, my fleshling, settled the matter that once again brought you begging." The birdling's belly clenched tight as his hand upon the fork. Glancing from the epaulette's bullion fringe to the impish penciled upsweep of Lady Lipstick's cat eye, hunger won out. The fork came down. With a push of the plunger, miraculous change occurred. The former thigh, joined to the majority of the supper via thigh meats and femur bone, tumbled and twisted, transubstantiating with hiss and sizzle from food to food like the fruit reel of a slot machine. In the flash of an eye, Salisbury steak, to asparagus with hollandaise drizzle, to chicken a la duke, demoted in the birdling's estimation due to very little chicken, mostly pea and mushroom. At last the former thigh lay wobbling in its final form, a jelly beef mold, all a-glisten in the curved shape of a swimming carp, olive for an eye. And as that fork-induced miracle unfolded, the supper spoke out, "Avast! Alack! Aghast!" "What," the birdling inquired, "does the supper say?" For the enunciations made unappetizing accompaniment, disturbing the genial quiet he would prefer. "Why, my darling peeper, would I ever learn to speak meal, when all the wide, vociferous world turns its tongue to me?" Some light cannibalism.
Yeah, that's cannibalism. This is great. Nothing like a little light cannibalism to keep the party running, yeah? Yeah, it's, also, yeah, I was about to say, my next reading got birds in it. No, what was I gonna say? I really need to read that story, that whole story. That's just, I need the Adventures of Captain Carnivore immediately. Now, moving on to Wonder. This comes from a short story that's actually published that you can read online if you want in Fusion Magazine. It's called Bird Heart. And this one was my attempt to tell sort of like a retold fairy tale. And it opens with an autopsy. So our narrator is an mortician? Oh God, I was about to say an autopsyer. That's not a word. Anyway, I'll come with this. Wonder. When I sliced the man's chest cavity open, feathers poured out. I recoiled, dropping my scalpel on the ground at my feet. The old man, a Mr. Clayton Montgomery, lay on the gurney in front of me, eyes closed, face unsmiling. If this was a joke, he was not in on it. I fingered the incision I cut into his chest, down the line of his sternum, searching for some kind of residue. No trace of blood on my gloves. I reached within the cut and pulled out a single black feather, a raven's. It had to be a prank of some kind, I thought, but I didn't know who would have set it up. Surely I would have seen someone at work on this body at some point, draining it dry and stuffing it full of feathers, but what purpose would that serve other than to demonstrate the cruelty of the person behind the prank? I decided to press on, to see how far this possible ruse had gone. I finished my incision and pulled the skin back, expecting the layer of feathers to be no more than skin deep. Wrens crowded in his lungs, or rather crowded together to form shapes like lungs. His abdomen erupted with all sorts of species. A stomach of robins, a spleen of sandpipers, a blackened liver made of crows, their wet feathers stuck together. And in the center of his ribcage, behind the illegitimate lungs, 2 cardinals lay there, embracing within one another's frozen wingspan. I could guess what they stood for.
Okay, so this, my wonder selection needs a little bit of context. The context is, the story is about a psychic who don't want to be psychic. And he's forced to dive into a lake against his will to commune with the spirit of a mountain that is haunting his village's dreams. It's like the typical front table of Barnes & Noble kind of stuff. And he hums to keep the voices of the dead out of his head, right? So that's like the vital background. Along a spur's ridge, a court of regal goats congregates. No precipice fear we, no fall. Our hooves meld to the face of the mountain. Its every pleasure, its sorrows, its seethings, we've traced in leaps and charges. We are as one, elder and child, land and life. Long muzzles lift, glint of far-gone sun caught in blonde, lordly manes. Do you hear your legacy? Impossible to keep out, so insistent proud are they. As one they turn their gaze upon me, back-swept, horns snaking, splitting, interweaving into a single woven crown. Above them, the tangle of that crown resembling a pyramidal peak, a lidless eye at center. Abandonment, betrayal, go forth and attend. And those last 4 words echo through the court. Of course I do hear the mountain itself vast and bitter, a grudge through and through. The previous divers' accountings never conveyed proper its spite, the blood prickle neath every word. If the neighbors knew, could feel it in full, they might just give up on our town entirely. But secondhand is easy. No dark drop, no confrontation. That's left to me. Comes the lip of a hanging valley, and the phantom forested hills shiver brightness below. Enough a sight to fix me in place, if not for knowing that risk. My only slender hope is through, survive this, so to run afterward. I leap into brilliance, certain my jaws clench will crack tooth, pass among skirts of aspen bough, teeming solicitations, each with tale of adventures in daylight, testimonies shredding my will ragged. My hum breaks loose and I give all breath, voice, volume, desperate to fend off, stay whole, stay me. But even as my screams fill this diving dress, it's clear they're never for drowning out such an acred chorus. I hope the neighbors hear, I so hope the bellows chamber fills to its rupture with my cries. Voice of the dead courses over and through. I'm consumed by moments, collective memory. I run with sap. My winding fingers tangle breezes and I creak pleasure. I taste rain, gorge, sun. I bud and burst and bud and burst, live 10,000 times over from sapling to husk. In each sprouting another layer of my resistance dwindled by delight of rootedness and ascent. I'm peeled to core. Most footsteps mark earth with the weight of a single life. Why should mine fall heavier? That's what I've always found at center, that question, why me? Never asked to see what lingers, get mocked for fear, forced off to a narrow, lonely way. But now, so erased of rickety walls between live and long dead, between me and not me, comes a clarity. Somehow, I'm grateful. All these miles of intertwined root tendril, memories of reaching for and finding others to hold fast life in constellation. Among them that I'd swear that I, even I, am terrible luminous. It feels a gift on offer. For the first time, I choose to answer that constant question burning in the marrow light. Yes, I will know of you all.
Good God, I love that story. You can find it online, by the way, at Ergot magazine. It's, that has such a visionary intensity to it. Like, it's part of that scene that you read. I love everything that washes over me when I read it. For the final installment of this, we have Hauntings. Now, a little bit of setup for mine. It is a whole flash piece. I wrote this, how many of you have seen Haunting of Hill House on Netflix? Okay, those of you who haven't, watch it. There's an episode of the show that revolves around a ghost called the Bent Neck Lady. Those of you who have seen the show know that it is probably the most terrifying thing put on Netflix. Maybe one of the most terrifying. It was so terrifying that it messed me up so hard I had to call other friends who were also messed up. to be like, why are we messed up? Why are we messed up by the ghost story? And so I decided, I'm like, well, I gotta shake this off. I'm gonna sit down, and I'm gonna write a story that messes me up more than the bent neck lady. I don't know that I succeeded, but I will leave that up to you to decide. All right, this one's called The Man in the Black Mask. 2 days after my 11th birthday, I awoke in the middle of the night to find my father sitting at the foot of my bed. At first, I only felt something pushing down on the foot of it and staying there. I thought it was Brutus, our border collie, but the bedroom door was shut and he always slept in the living room on the old Barca lounger. I woke up slowly. I couldn't see anything at first. Then I heard a soft, gentle weeping noise, the occasional stifled sob in between short, hard breaths. I had only heard Dad cry once, at Grandpa's funeral a few months before, and I knew it was him. Once I gained enough nerve to speak, I asked why he was there. I'm sorry, he said, taking a sharp inhale through his nose. I had a bad dream, Tanner. How could you have a bad dream, I said. Everyone has bad dreams sometimes, son. My eyes adjusted to the light by that point. I saw him in silhouette, sitting with his legs slung over the side of my bed. He was hunched over, leaning against his arms, with his hands propped over on his knees. He wore his red and white striped pajamas. It's the worst dream I've ever had, he said. Then he turned to look at me in the dark. His eyes shone, and he blinked at me. I had a dream about you, he said. I had a dream that I was alone in the house. Your mother was gone for some reason. Maybe she was staying with her sister because we fought again. I don't know. Something like that. It's always something like that. He paused, wiping his nose with his hand. I was in the bathroom, and I heard breaking glass, the unlocking of the door, someone walking on my entryway tile. The dog wasn't barking, but I knew someone was breaking into the house. I walked into the living room, and I saw a man dressed all in black. Black ski mask, black sweater, black gloves, the works. Dad stopped and took another breath. Your brother was in the living room too, and the man in black had him pinned down to the ground. He punched Shane in the face and choked him, and he stabbed him in the side. When I could finally move, I ran after him, and I pulled him off of Shane. Your brother was already gone. I threw the man on his back, and I forearmed him and shoved my hand into his nose. It made a crunching sound that I'd never want to hear again. His voice dropped to a whisper so low, I strained to hear it over the sound of the heating vent in my room. I took his mask off. Then he looked right at me again. It was you, he said. Your face and everything, but bloodied. And before I woke up, before you died, you looked me in the eye and you said, Daddy, why did you do that? He let out a deep, croaking sob, covered his face. Why would I dream about that? Why would I ever dream about that? I had to come and check on you. You understand? He looked down at my comforter, said nothing else for a little bit before saying, I had to make sure. I had to. When Dad vanished, I got up and sprinted in my parents' bedroom. I was crying, but I didn't make any noise. I was just in shock. I poked Mom in the shoulder until she woke up. She propped herself on her hands, squinting at me, and flicked the side table lamp on. Honey, she said, running her hands over my cheeks to wipe the tears. What happened? I told her that Dad came into my room, sat on the edge of the bed, told me about the dream, where I killed my brother, and then he killed me. Her lips became this thin, pressed line, and she said nothing for a long time, but then she frowned, the saddest I'd seen her since Dad's funeral 2 weeks before. You had a dream, she said. I dream about him too, all the time. I asked her if Dad ever told her a dream like that. She said, no, not ever.
Okay, so my haunting is also a standalone flash piece. This one is called And She Moves Like Smoke, and it's up on Wiggly magazine. And she licks rainwater from the palm of her hand. And she has that moon-eyed laugh. And she never wears any kind of shoe no matter what the weather's doing. And she sprinkles menstrual blood over the spider plant's soil. And she puts her rent in a lavender envelope on the fridge under the Dollywood magnet. And once when we opened the envelope, all these glittering fairy flies skittered out, stinging. Now she'll turn the faucet to a dribble and dance along to the spatter, some old-timey twirling minuet. And she has a thing for blurry photographs, to the point the walls of her room are covered, hazes of tree line, of night sky, of faces. And she's pretty deadpan, like the time she said she never suffers a Sunday because Sundays are too fucking quiet, so she just concentrates at midnight on Saturday and dematerializes for 24 hours, and we laughed at that, but she didn't even crack a smile. And she asks if we've missed her every time she enters a room, and we say, of course, because there's something kintsugi in the sound of her voice. And she's been with us a while, I guess, since, when was it she moved in? And she gave herself a stick and poke above the knee of a looping symbol that she says appeared to her in a long, dark dream and hasn't been seen by living eyes for like 7 centuries. And she puts petals from the wilted flower arrangement on the kitchen counter under her tongue. And she looks away and hums during all the commercials. And she leaves hair everywhere, coiled in a shape that seems so familiar. And she's always eyeing our smoke box, the carved rosewood antique we found at the thrift store for $2 because it was stuck shut. Now we can't find the lid to. And she acts nervous anytime we reach in to roll a joint, even though we've explained it's totally decriminalized. And then she asks how long we think we could live in a prison as small as that very box. And she asks what we would dream of in that time. And she floats above our beds while we sleep, we're pretty sure, drinking down our exhalations and disappearing just before we can get our eyes cracked open. But the echo and warmth of her still clings in the air above us, and we're almost disappointed, almost invite her out of hiding. But some instinct keeps us quiet and clutching only each other's bodies until dawn. And she brews kombucha. And she'll sometimes whisper, never again, to the spider plant as she pinches off pieces of terracotta. And she's all we ever think about. God, make it stop. A flood of notions and images and tastes and scents, endless shades of her, and they all feel eager for our attention. And when we try to think of anything else, even terrible, heartbreaking things, hoping those will jar us from this endless torment of her, nothing ever works, and we're swept through our days, lost and so tired, and we just want to be left alone. Please, just let us go. Get the fuck out of... And she presses leaves in the pages of our books, and she's filled our recipes with beetle-chewed scraps of elm. And she's adrift in the dark, curling and clinging to the air we breathe. And she wants to know, have we missed her? Have we missed her? Have we missed her?
Yeah, you just have to hold the button to turn it on. Yeah, on the top it should be. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So, we've reached the final point, and first off, you won that. Yeah, you won. Like, man, you're good. You're so good. Does anyone have any questions for our guest or myself? Anything that came to mind while you were listening to the reading?
I'm real friendly.
Oh yeah, we'll answer like any question. So I will actually ask something. How would you describe like your overall process of sort of finding, do you feel like you find ideas for stories that like build into larger things? Because I know sometimes people have conceptions of like stories arriving in our heads fully formed. Mm-hmm. Does it happen like that for you sometimes, or is it really just more about the perspective that you apply to the world?
Yeah, thank you. No, I've never been blessed with that fully formed thing.
Yeah.
So for me, it tends to be a lot of little scraps and sort of like little itches of imagination that I just collect, you know, in notebooks or in a document. And I sort of have this arbitrary 3 rule where I feel like it takes 3 of these scraps or itches to combine into something that has enough substance for me to do something with. Completely arbitrary, but just feels true, you know?
Yeah.
So that's generally what I do. But I do a lot of, when I'm not working on a specific project, I do a lot of free writing just to sort of shake loose, and often in the course of that, an image or a voice will start to kick in, and I really just indulge that and see how far it will go, and a lot of my stuff comes from that indulgence. That's generally my process.
Nice. And it looks like Evie has a question, so
I was gonna say, that was that.
I'll get you the mic.
I think,
Go ahead and ask your question.
okay. Oh God. Oh, it's weird. Oh my God, I did not like the sound of my voice. I was just thinking, to think we were talking about that particular topic of planning out stories in class earlier. If, like Adam Mills asked you a question that when back in Forms and Theories of Creative Writing with Dr. Benzel, I think I asked you a similar question to that, if I remember correctly. How the ideas pop into your head, or how you let the chaos happen first before organizing it. If that's correctly.
Yeah, that is my MO. Chaos first, refinement later. And I would have said in that class, for me, it comes down to you can always come back and revise, you can always come back and impose order, but what you can never do is get that weird spark again.
Yeah.
You know, so trying to let that happen the way that it happens initially, keeping that, and then playing with it.
Yeah. All right.
All right, thanks for the question. And Gabe, we have a question as well?
Yeah. So, what was the impetus for the very fashionable Death Squad? Because it reminds me of like various fictional evil factions with killer fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Like it makes me think of like the stormtroopers from Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, you know, real life Hugo Boss Nazis. You know, there's a power to aesthetics. That's part of what I was thinking about, that aesthetics are a way to draw people into ideology. They're a way to keep people invested in ideology, or to cover up what the actions that ideology performs, you know? But specifically where it came from is that I was teaching at KU in 2016, fall 2016, the election happened. And without getting too deep into it, myself and a lot of my friends, because of who we are intrinsically, were wondering, how safe are we going to be in the coming years? You know, there are a lot of norms that were eroded in the process leading up to that and subsequently. And some people have the ability, through privilege, to ignore that and not be too worried about it. But for a lot of us, the erosion of those norms were warning signs of very possible futures. And for me, this was the first thing that I wrote after the election happened, and I was thinking very specifically of my father's journey here from El Salvador, and some of the content of that story is straight up, I guess not autobiographical, but biographical, in that my father did come face to face with the death squad in El Salvador, and he was one of the fortunate few who weren't just killed on sight. They gave him the ultimatum of him and every adult male member of his family leaving right then El Salvador on foot, or they would burn the house and kill the entire family that was left. So him and his brothers left on foot and came to the United States. And again, that is a reality that is the reason that I exist. That is the reason why I am in this room with you. And so I cannot afford to ignore certain things when I see them, you know? So that story kind of came out of all of that.
Earlier this week, I saw a tweet of some guy like fanboying over like fictional Nazi designs in some animated movie and like talking about how cool they are, and it was.
I should also mention that I used to, the dark chapter of my life was that I used to work for a fashion company as an illustrator, and so the sort of like the language of design was a world that I lived in for like 5 years, so that's also part of it.
All right, great question. When you explained that, I definitely remembered the context of just that time at KU in general around the election. That was not a fun time. We have time for one more question from the audience if anyone has it. Any final questions?
I feel like 2020.
No. Wait, maybe a little better.
We can circle up after.
Yeah, we can circle up after. Any last questions? Yes, here.
You mentioned as part of your process that you do free writing.
Mhm.
Can you just elaborate on what that
Oh,
is?
yeah. So free writing, sometimes you encounter it in like your freshman comp classroom. It's the idea that you sit down and write while trying to turn off the part of your mind that is judging what you're writing, turning off the part of your mind that wants to stop and fix things, turning off the part of your mind that is, even while you're in the act of writing, seeing like the possibilities and potentials for what you've already written. You're just trying to inhabit the moment of invention for as long as possible. And it's not easy, especially like in the beginning. It's really hard to not stop, to not edit what you're doing. But what happens, and this might get kind of woo-woo, right? I'll try to keep it feet on earth, right? But what happens is the more you do it, you kind of can more predictably get into a kind of flow state where what I think of as like the material that's in the back of your brain starts to bubble up, the stuff that surprises you, you know, and that for me is the exciting stuff. That's the stuff that I like lean into and like, what is that, you know? And so if you give this practice of free writing a fair shot and stick to it with that flow state, it kind of, the way that I think about it is that it builds a relationship between your conscious thinking mind, the pattern-making part of your brain, and then that wonderful cauldron of weirdness that we usually only have access to when we're dreaming, you know? And so it, for me at least, has been a fairly consistent way, again, to keep surprising myself and to see around corners or places that I'm stuck. So that is essentially what free writing is.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, so thank you all for being here for this event. It was really lovely seeing you all here. Before I let you go for the day so you can go get dinner or whatever you need to do, I do want to let everyone know that we do have another reading coming up after spring break if you're interested. Just to plug our local writers, Margaret Brown is among us. She is part of the Working Writers reading that we'll be holding on Wednesday, March 22nd, after spring break. That will be at 4 o'clock in MG 125. And Margaret will be reading alongside other colleagues of mine in humanities, Mel Bringle and James Everett. So we hope to see you there after spring break, but thank you for being here. Have a great night and stay weird.